To many, I am a short-lived king who left little mark on history. I am unlike my father, Henry VIII, whose charm won the hearts of his subjects and the hands of 6 beautiful queens. Nor am I like my half-sister, Bloody Mary, who burnt Protestant priests like candles. I am also not like my half-sister Elizabeth, who is the subject of movies and discussion till this day. Why did she refuse to marry? Who did she love? To most people, I am just a sick boy, manipulated by the Duke of Northumberland into giving my crown to his daughter-in-law, Jane Grey. Sick boy? No, you're wrong. I am tall and intelligent like my father, Henry VIII. I am good-looking with a great personality, like my mother, Queen Jane Seymour. I was once a happy and compassionate boy. Actually, I was very close to my 2 half-sisters. Princess Elizabeth once gave me a shirt she made for me herself. And although I did not approve of her interest in foreign dances in 1546, I sent Mary a note stating, "I love you most." For a boy who had to grow up without a mother, a sister who is 21 years my senior is the perfect replacement for a mom. But the older I get, the more I know about them, and the less I like them. I realized that they were not really my sisters. They were the products of my father's mistakes. Mary's mother committed the crime of incest when she lied to my father about her relationship with my uncle Arthur. Catherine of Aragon led my father to believe that their marriage was never consummated. Elizabeth's adulterous mother lied to my father, manipulated him, and then had adulterous affairs with 5 men. When I was old enough to understand the extent of her crimes, I wish my father had not beheaded her, though I could have done it myself. I couldn't even trust that Elizabeth was really my sister. The chance of her being the daughter of Anne Boleyn's lover is 5 times more likely than her being my sister. When I learned the teaching of God, I realized that my mission in life was to protect the Protestant faith. I felt so strongly against the evils in Rome that I wrote a treatise about why the Pope isn't the Antichrist. Remember, I was only 12. I was interested in analyzing theological controversies. I did live up to my Tudor name, to be brave, intelligent, logical, and a bit cold-hearted. But I want you to know how proud I am to be my father's son. Not because he built England from the ground up, not because he had many military and diplomatic victories that he could brag about, not even because he is a decisive and charismatic leader, but because he brought the Protestant religion to England. My life changed when my father married Queen Catherine Parr in 1543. She was kind and loving. She convinced my father to add Mary and Elizabeth back to the succession list. She treated us like her own, and she was wise, with a great personality. I called her my most dear mother, as I had received so many benefits from her that my mind could hardly grasp them. But even with her care, my father's health was in steady decline. The last time I wrote to them was in January 1547, thanking them for his New Year's gifts on their portraits. My father died 2 weeks later. My uncle Edward Seymour and William Paget took me to Lady Elizabeth's residence and told both of us of our father's death and his will. On February 20th, 1547, during my coronation, I was told to continue the reformation of the Church of England, the tyranny of the bishops in Rome banished from your subjects and images removed. I knew from that day on it was my duty to protect England and my faith.
I didn't want to die. I had a country facing civil unrest and a hostile neighbor in the north. My son was only 9. How could I die? How could I leave the burden of running the country like that to a young boy? I handpicked 16 executors to act as Edward's council members. They were supposed to protect him and the country. I tried to balance the power by naming both conservatives and reformers to the Privy Council. I also included Jane's 2 brothers. I hoped Edward and Thomas Seymour could protect my son, their nephew. However, soon after my death, Stephen Gardiner, the lead conservative Privy Councillor, was kicked out, while Thomas Howard, the 3rd Duke of Norfolk, was accused of treason. His estate was taken, and he was locked in the Tower of London until his death. In a very short time, the power and land of the old faith were distributed to other council members. Protestants or Catholics, greed is greed. It is sad that no one trusted following my orders. Soon, Edward Seymour became the Lord Protector of my son Edward. He was named the Duke of Somerset, the most powerful lord in England. Then my widow, Catherine Parr, who was allowed to keep her jewelry and money and the title Queen Dowager, jumped to the arms of Thomas Seymour. In 6 months, she secretly married Thomas Seymour. Poor Catherine. Look what kind of husband you found for yourself in such a rush. Thomas Seymour might have been young and handsome, but the only thing he wanted was your money. Have you thought of what this scandalous love affair would do to our reputation? Catherine and Thomas did not share their wedding news until Catherine was pregnant. The king, the councils, and Lady Mary all became furious. However, they forgave her because of their love for her. Lady Elizabeth even moved in with her to further her education. Catherine soon realized what a mistake she made when she saw her husband, Thomas Seymour, in a compromising position with Lady Elizabeth. She asked Lady Elizabeth to move out, and she died a few months later after giving birth to a short-lived baby girl.
Life under the protection of my uncle Edward Seymour was terrible. He did not allow me to play with other children, and I was a king with no spending money. He thought I had no need for money. Right, but that is not his business. My other uncle, Thomas Seymour, tried to play the good uncle. He often brought me gifts of money. I loved to collect the shining gold coins he gave me, but as I got older, I realized those came from my mint, and he had stolen them from me. When I heard about his despicable affair with Lady Elizabeth, my affection to him turned to hatred. When my beloved stepmother, Catherine, died, I hated him even more. I had no problem condemning him to death when he became crazy and entered my home one night, obviously with the intention to kidnap me. He must have been pretty surprised when I came in as a witness at his trial, to testify on how he gave me coins stolen from my royal mint. The council couldn't find evidence against him on charges of treason, so they condemned him to death for failing his duty to me. He was beheaded in March of 1549. I was glad my mother wasn't alive to see how greedy and sinful her brother was. Of course, my other uncle could have saved his brother, but he did not feel that it was worth the trouble. How stupid he was, watching his brother die on some petty charge. People realized his nephew, the king, shed no tears on signing his uncle's death warrant. So maybe he would not mind signing another one to get rid of his least favorite uncle. That happened sooner than anyone expected. In October 1549, Edward Seymour sensed the political climate against him. He issued a proclamation calling for assistance, took the king with him, and withdrew to Windsor Castle. He did this in such a way that I wrote in my diary, "Methinks I am in prison." That, of course, earned him a ticket to the Tower of London. He would have lost his head if not for my leniency, but the council and I decided to release him in 1550 and allow him back to the council. However, he tried to overthrow Dudley's council, so was beheaded in 1552. I wrote in my chronicle the Duke of Somerset had his head cut off upon Tower Hill between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning. Considering the honor and power my father and I gave him, it is such a shame that he repaid us with great treason. I know a king should never trust anyone, not your uncle, your sister, or even your mother. I know I will be a great king like my father, because I have no emotional attachment to the people around me. I am always polite and gentle. I have a good head and never lose my cool. If only I could add 10 more years. I'd be the king everyone talks about. I would have a beautiful queen and lots of children. But I got seriously ill in February 1553. By June, I had to face the fact that I wouldn't make it to my 17th birthday. I didn't want to die. I had so many things I wanted to do. So many. But one must go when God calls. I can't die in peace knowing what my sister Mary would do after my death. I had no choice but to cut her off the succession list. As for Lady Elizabeth, she may be my father's daughter, but I just can't leave the English crown to someone with no morals and questionable birth. So, I decided to leave my throne to Lady Jane Grey, my cousin, once removed. Jane was a devoted Protestant and intelligent Tudor girl. I know she will be a great queen. Before my death, I had signed in front of a lawyer my device for succession, and I made sure the council knew I wrote it out in my own will, while I had a clear and sound mind. To make sure the act would be followed, over 100 nobles signed. However, Lady Jane was queen for only 9 days. When Mary's troops approached London, all the nobles who supported my succession plan bowed to her and changed sides. Mary then tried to force the Catholic pin on England. She married Philip II of Spain, burnt Protestant priests, and turned the England bloody red. I could have never imagined that the one who restored the Protestant faith would be my other sister, Elizabeth. And despite the early affairs with Thomas Seymour, she stayed single her entire life. On my dying bed, I wonder if my father will be angry with me if I meet him in heaven. Will he be mad at me for superseding his act of succession? Will he be mad that I died without an heir? Will he be angry about me dying so young? Sorry, Dad. I did what I had to do. I wish I had done more. I'm sorry for disappointing you.
That's okay, son. No matter what happened, the show went on. Tudor blood still runs through every English royalty today.
Do you know anyone who was abandoned by everyone close to her? Everyone who should have loved her turned against her. And what did she do? She turned against the only person in the world that loved her, the person who suffered the same fate as her. She was also abandoned and disgraced. She was her mother. And guess who this horrible, cruel, and heartless person is? It was me, Mary Tudor. My parents' marriage was a journey that started on earth, stopped in heaven, but ended in hell. My mother, the beautiful, intelligent, kind, and sweet Catherine of Aragon, was the princess that every European monarch wished to marry. But her parents, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, gave her hand to Arthur, the Prince of Wales. They married in 1501, but Arthur died 5 months later. My grandparents demanded the return of their daughter, a huge dowry of 200,000 ducats. King Henry VII couldn't be partnered with the gold and silver coins, and had no plan to lose his alliance with Spain. So instead, he offered his second son, Prince Henry, to take over where Arthur had left off. But Henry was only 10 years old at the time, so Catherine had stayed in England to wait for him to grow up. Believe it or not, she became the first female ambassador to Europe in the history, and in 1507, then she married my father in 1509, and for 6 months in 1513, she was the regent of England when my father was away in France. And during the Battle of Flodden, her emotional speech about English courage was a big reason for the huge victory that followed. What a girl. She played the part of a devoted and loving wife very well. Despite the many extramarital affairs that my father had, she never complained. While as a fertile Spanish lady, she got pregnant only 2 months after the wedding, but miscarried her baby girl in January 1510. 4 months after the miscarriage, she was pregnant with my brother, Henry, the Duke of Cornwall. The baby was born on January 1st, 1511, and died February 22nd, 1511. Then, in 1513, my mother gave birth to a stillborn boy, followed by another stillborn boy in 1515. And then, on February 8th, 1516, I was born. After my joyful birth, my mother had another miscarriage in 1517. And then the last baby girl was born in November of 1518. She only lived a few hours.
I loved my beautiful Mary since the day she was born. I did not dare to love her too much, as I was afraid to lose her like I lost her many brothers and sisters. But that strong little thing wiped my worries away and became a smart, tough cookie. I once bragged to the Venetian ambassador that this girl never cries. Gosh, how I wish Mary were a boy. She inherited warrior spirits from both sides of her parents, the spirits of great kings and queens. She could have been the king that everyone feared. Well, she did become the queen that everyone feared, the Bloody Mary.
Unlike most royal children who grew up living with nannies and tutors, my mother was very close to me. She was also involved in my education, and actually, to make sure that I got the best education, she commissioned the humanist Juan Louis Vives to write De Institutione Feminae Christianae, a treatise on the education of girls. Showered with love and attention, I was able to read and write Latin by the age of 9. I learned French and Spanish and music and dance and Greek. When the hope for a son had faded, my father's love for my mother also faded, and I became the casualty under the crossfire.
No. Although I was deeply disappointed with Catherine's failure to give me a son, I was still kind to my daughter Mary. I had plans to marry her to the son of Francis I, the King of France. But when that did not work out, I planned to marry her to Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, her cousin. That agreement was mutually canceled a few years later because Charles, the 27-year-old emperor, just couldn't wait for King Francis I for the badly needed French alliance.
You know, Francis I ended up marrying my aunt, Mary Tudor. He was too old even for her. Obviously, to my father, I was just a disposable political asset.
That is so unfair, Mary. Do you remember that in 1525 I sent you to the border of Wales? I let you have your own court at Ludlow Castle and many of the royal prerogatives reserved for the Prince of Wales. Many people called you the Princess of Wales. It was clear that the whole world considered you the heir to the crown.
Yes, I was given the honor temporarily and stayed near Wales from 1525 to 1528. I came back when my mother and I fell off your favorite list. This stress caused me to get sick. I fell into a depression and started to have problems with my menstruation. In 1533, my father declared marriage to my mother voided and married his pregnant mistress, Anne Boleyn.
Who are you to judge me? I gave you honor, power, and life. I could have taken it away at any time. My duty to my country was to have an heir. Your mother failed to deliver that. You failed to deliver that by being a girl.
You can have your mistress and your other children. Why do you have to disgrace my mother and me?
Disgrace? I let your mother keep the title as Princess Dowager, as a widow to my brother Arthur. She disgraced herself for dragging the war with me. I need to marry Anne so that my son could be born legit.
You could have had legitimate children with Anne without making me illegitimate. Why didn't you do that?
To marry Anne was a must. To make you a bastard, that was also a must. As I couldn't have children disobey me the way you did, you didn't deserve to be my daughter.
So my father took away my title as princess, took away my allowance, and my household. And he made me a member of Princess Elizabeth's household to humiliate me. I refused. Then my father put me under house arrest. I thought I would be better off dead. I got sick often, and even the doctor thought it was from my father's ill treatment of me. The imperial ambassador, Eustace Chapuis, was kind and tried to intercede on my behalf. Of course, it fell on deaf ears. My father and I did not speak for 3 years. When my mother was ill, I was not even allowed to see her, and that also made me ill. In 1536, my mother died, and I never even got the chance to say a last goodbye. However, Queen Anne Boleyn lost the king's love very quickly after failing to deliver him the son she had promised. In 1536, Queen Anne lost her head to my father's rage, and 2 weeks later, my father married Jane Seymour. Jane was kind and good-hearted, and she convinced my father to accept me back on the court.
When Mary defied my orders and refused to acknowledge Anne as queen, she forced me to show her my bad side. She had been on that side ever since. Jane, my new queen, asked me to make peace with her. Sure. But the king does not make peace with just anyone. The king's enemies had to bow down and beg for mercy.
Removing Anne was like removing a stone between my father and I. I missed my father, and I missed the life I had once had. So I submitted to his authority, and I agreed to it all as long as God and my conscience permitted. But my father refused any change to the terms that he had laid out.
So I made it very simple for Mary. Either recognize me as head of the Church of England and repudiate papal authority, agree that my temporary union with her mother was unlawful, and acknowledge that she was the product of the voided affairs, or never see me again.
In a moment of weakness, I agreed to all his demands. I could never forgive myself. I had betrayed my own conscience, my God, and my poor mother. I could never forgive myself.
I was about to forgive Mary, but in 1536, a rebellion called the Pilgrimage of Grace demanded me to make Mary legitimate again. I hated being told to do anything, so I killed them all. But I did not punish Mary. When Edward was born in 1537, I was kind enough to make Mary her brother's godmother. Mary, was I a good father, or what?
In 1537, I was young and beautiful, and I wanted to be loved. Actually, I would have loved to leave England, but my father did not accept Duke Philip of Bavaria in 1539. When Thomas Cromwell suggested that I marry the Duke of Cleves to form a potential alliance, he thought that was a good idea, but married Anne of Cleves to form the alliance instead of giving me away. See, being illegitimate scared away most of my potential suitors, but I could still find a good match for being the granddaughter of the power of the Aragons. However, my father made no effort to find me happiness, and he also refused to provide me my dowry. So I became the girl that nobody wanted. Things got a little bit better when my father married Queen Anne Catherine Parr. She was kind and convinced my father to add Elizabeth and I back into the succession list. However, my father soon died and left the crown to my 9-year-old brother Edward. By then, I was 30 years old. I had declining health and a faded look. Edward hated me for my Catholic beliefs. I thought Edward was brainwashed by his Protestant tutors. I tried to forgive him in my heart. When Edward was younger, he was the cutest and sweetest little boy. And he once said that he loved me the most. But when I saw him in 1550 for Christmas, my 13-year-old brother embarrassed me publicly by reproving me for practicing my Catholic beliefs. I was heartbroken, and I cried. Situations in England were getting worse, so I pleaded for help from my cousin, Emperor Charles. He arranged for my escape from England, but I got cold feet at the last minute. Edward was like my father. He did not forgive disobedience. He took both Lady Elizabeth and I off the succession list. To him, we were not his sisters. We were only his subjects. We needed to do things his way. He gave the crown to Jane Grey, a 16-year-old cousin who knew nothing and was nothing. God took away my mother. I could do nothing about that. My father took away my title. I fought and I lost. But this time I would rather die than to let Edward do this to me. I declared myself the queen and demanded the crown of England. I had nothing to fight against the powerful armies and lords, but God was on my side, and my subjects came to my aid. In 9 days, we had defeated the traitors, and I got my kingdom back. Since that day, I knew I owed everything to God. God put me there so I could carry out his mission to restore the old faith in England. But I could not do it alone. So I again asked for advice from my cousin Charles, the Emperor. He proposed marriage to his son, my cousin, Prince Philip of Spain. There was not a better match in the world, so I agreed. There were furious oppositions in council, but I assured them that my duty as Queen of England was above all, and there was no time to lose if they wanted me to produce an heir. The wedding took place in 1544, when I was 38 years old. Philip was handsome, intelligent, and strong. I could not have wished for a better husband. He was nice and kind to me despite our age difference. I prayed to God to let me have a son, and in 1554, my period stopped and I started gaining weight. I did not mind the terrible morning sickness when the doctor announced my pregnancy. The Parliament even passed an act making Philip the regent in case I died during childbirth. In the last week of April 1555, I released my half-sister Elizabeth from house arrest so that she could witness the birth of my baby. But the baby did not come in April, nor May, not even in June. It became obvious that I wasn't pregnant. I had become the joke of the world. Although I agreed to enforce religious freedom before ascension to the throne, I realized God wanted me to abolish Edward's religious laws. I restored the church doctrines and reaffirmed clerical celibacy. I then approved the Hearsay Acts, which was the reason for the executions and exile of 800 rich Protestants. Many of them were burnt on sticks. However, God did not grant my wishes to have a son, despite my work for him. Philip became king when Charles abdicated in January 1556. When Philip left to handle his new responsibility, I was left alone at home, missing him dearly. Then he came back to England in 1557. I thought I was pregnant again. Again, there were no signs of my baby long after my due date. Humiliated once again, I was forced to declare Elizabeth as my lawful successor. I died in November of 1558. I left my crown to Elizabeth, the product of the unlawful union between my father and Anne Boleyn. My death marked the end of the Catholic faith in England.
Do you know what happened when you moved heaven and earth? I was what happened. When my father fell in love with my mother, Anne Boleyn, he divorced his queen, Catherine of Aragon, broke up with Rome, and changed all Catholic churches to churches of England. All that to welcome his coming son, the product and testament of his everlasting love to Anne Boleyn. Although my father was not happy to have a daughter, he was at least assured that my mother could produce a healthy child. He gave me everything anyone could have wished for. That was, until my mother got on his bad side and was sent to the Tower of London.
Although I was very disappointed when Elizabeth was born, I loved my beautiful little girl. I took away Mary's title of princess and gave it to her. I disbanded Mary's servants and gave Elizabeth the honor and privileges of a princess from the day she was born. I was the best father in the world.
When my father decided to remove my mother by cutting off her head, I dropped from being the royal princess to an illegitimate daughter with a questionable birth. You see, he could have killed my mother for treason or murder, but he convicted her for having affairs with 5 men, one of whom was her brother, George Boleyn. Could you imagine how horrible that must have been? My father had no concern about me, nor my future.
The Anne I fell in love with disappeared. She thought she could do anything as the queen. Stupid woman. I gave her everything, so I could also take away everything. She fought for everything, and she dared to fight me for having other women. She flirted with other men and made me the joke of the town. I had no choice.
So I dropped from heaven and fell to earth and became Lady Elizabeth when my father yanked away my princess title. The marriage proposals that flooded my doorstep stopped, unlike my half-sister Mary, who had a noble princess mother, as well as a powerful grandparents. My mother was a disgraced queen, accused of sleeping with every man she could get her hands on, including her own brother. Despite losing both of my father's love and my mother, I had a great education. My tutor Champernowne taught me French, Flemish, Italian, and Spanish. William Grindal then taught me English, Latin, Italian, and Greek. My interest in language continued throughout my life. I was also able to speak fluent Welsh, Cornish, Scottish, and Irish. I was probably the best educated woman in the 16th century of England. Maybe that was why I liked my stepmother, Catherine Parr, so much. She was very well educated and even published 2 popular books. She was nice to me, as well as Mary and Edward. As my father's health declined, she put Mary and I back on the succession list. Of course, we were still illegitimate children. Actually, I became an orphan at the age of 3, not only because I lost my mother, but because I lost my father's love as well.
I had accomplished many things in life. The secret was to move on and focus on what's important instead of worrying about what was in the past. Elizabeth, you were in the past. I didn't conveniently forget about you. I just had more important things to do.
Once in a while, like every several years, my father dropped by to see me. I longed for his love so much. I focused on my education so that he could be proud of me. I turned out to be beautiful as my father and mother.
Elizabeth looked just like Anne. It was painful to look at her. All the memories, good and bad, with Anne flooded back to my mind. She was the silent accuser, pointing her finger at me as her mother's killer. I didn't want to, nor need to, explain how her mother betrayed me. But loving her was difficult, and I just couldn't do it.
Under the urge of my last stepmother, Catherine Parr, my father reconciled with Mary and I. I was so happy. But he soon died in 1547. My brother Edward was only 9 years old. I was devastated by the loss of my father. I had so many dreams of being with him. However, those dreams were shattered. Queen Dowager Catherine soon married the most eligible bachelor in England, Lord Thomas Seymour, King Edward's uncle. Edward, Mary, and the council were furious at her hasty marriage without their approval. I didn't blame her. I knew how it felt to be lonely. Queen Catherine was kind enough to invite me to live with her. She offered to pay for my education and invited my cousin Jane Grey to join us. I was thrilled, as my best memories were with her and my father. But when I arrived, I saw the kind, handsome, intelligent, and charming Lord Admiral Thomas. He was nice, sweet, and talked to me like the father I never had. He was like a father figure that appeared in the shining armor of a handsome knight. He complimented me on how beautiful I was every day. My heart beat like a deer when he was near me. From the way he looked at me, I knew he felt the same way. Queen Catherine was pregnant and had little time for me, but Thomas spent a lot of time talking and playing with me. felt the void left behind by my father and filled the hole in my heart. Catherine became furious and sent me away when she found us embracing each other. Catherine could separate us physically, but she couldn't separate the love in our hearts. When Catherine died in September 1548, Thomas told me that he wanted to marry me. I told him that my answer would be yes, if he could get council approval. And he tried. However, when they learned about that, he was arrested for plotting to marry me and his attempt to overthrow his brother, the Lord Protector. I don't know why it was wrong for him to propose to me. He was widowed, and I was single. He was of high status and respected. If he could marry the Queen Dowager, why could he marry the illegitimate daughter of King Henry? My brother Edward was furious when he learned about prior liaison. He asked Sir Robert Tyrrell to interrogate me. Although I admitted nothing, he put on record, I do see it in her face that she is guilty. For that, poor Thomas was beheaded on March 20th, 1549. People don't know how kind I actually was. I should have killed Robert Tyrrell for causing Thomas's death, but I left him alone until his death in 1572. Although I liked Edward more than I liked Mary, Edward eliminated me from the succession, while Mary did not. Mary arrested me and almost had me killed for no good reasons, while Edward did not. Gosh, what kind of a family did I have? My father killed my mother, my sister put me in jail, and my brother cut me off from my inheritance. In November of 1558, when my sister, the Bloody Mary, died, I was the only choice left for the English throne, unless you wished to give the crown to Queen Mary of Scots, who was a Catholic married to the future King of France. Giving the crown to her would have been like giving England to France, and ceded defeat to Scotland. Plus, they wanted their 25-year-old queen to produce a healthy male heir for their Tudor dynasty. However, they did not know that I had already gave my heart to Robert Dudley when we were both imprisoned in the Tower of London. Robert was tall, handsome, intelligent, charming, and loving. He was perfect in every way, but he was from a treasonous family, and he already had a wife. But at that time, who cared? We both might have been dead by the time the next death warrant arrived, but fate put me in the throne and put Robert in my palm. I rejected marriage proposals from kings and emperors because I had to stay true to my heart. For a short while, I thought my dream was coming true. As Robert's wife, Amy, mysteriously fell down the stairs and died. But Robert soon became the prime suspect. Although there was no evidence of him being guilty, the cloud that hovered over our hearts and our heads made any hope for marriage impossible. Robert was always by my side. He was my man and served me whenever I needed him. However, he wanted a son more than he wanted the girl with the crown, so he secretly married Lettice Noailles in 1578. By that time, I was 45 years old and had no chance of producing an heir. My long line of suitors were gone years ago, but then the Duke of Anjou, the handsome French prince, heir apparent to the French throne, proposed to me. The young Duke fell in love with me quickly when we met. His love proved that I was still charming. He loved me even though he was 23 years younger than me, even though he was the heir to the French throne, and marrying me would mean he would not have any children. but love is blind, and I was willing to give my hand to him. The discussion fell apart when his brother, Henry III, in 1581, wanted us to marry before we finalized the Anglo-French alliance. I said no, as I must marry on my own terms. The Duke was so upset, he refused to leave England and openly declared that he would kidnap me and make me his bride. Of course, that did not happen. He left England with a broken heart and died in 1584 when he was only 29 years old. I was a good queen. England thrived under my 44-year reign. I had major military victories that made England the strongest country in Europe. Despite cutting off my cousin, Queen Mary of Scots' head, I left the English crown to her son, King James. Many things had changed over the years, but I was still the girl, only longing for love that she never had up until I died in 1603. A woman who could have everything, but ended up with nothing. No husband, no children, no love.